Welcome to our deep dive into work-life balance
Oh, okay.
around the world.
Yeah.
We're going to look at some really interesting data from the OECD
Okay.
and this global life-work balance index that was put together by Remote.
Interesting.
And they're a big company that works in HR and recruitment.
I see.
And you might be surprised by what we find,
Yeah.
especially if you think the U.S. is a
Huh.
leader in this area.
Yeah, it's
Phew.
it is interesting because we talk about the American dream
Right.
and it's so tied to hard work,
Yeah.
but then the data really challenges that whole narrative when we look at work-life balance.
Exactly. And it seems like both the OECD and Remote kind of agree that Western Europe,
Yeah.
along with New Zealand and Australia,
Right.
they're the real front runners in this area,
Yeah.
but they're measuring things a bit differently.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
So the OECD is really looking at the actual hours worked
Mm-hmm.
versus time dedicated to leisure and personal care. And while it's really important, Remote actually takes it a step further, and they factor in things like parental leave,
Okay.
minimum wage, sick pay, annual leave.
Got it.
So it's really not just about having time,
Yeah.
but having the support systems to actually enjoy that time.
I see. So like Italy
Yeah.
tops the OECD list.
Okay.
They get an extra hour and a half each day
Wow.
for leisure and personal care
Yeah.
compared to the average OECD worker. So that's like 90 minutes every day.
That's amazing.
What would you do with an extra 90 minutes every day?
Oh my gosh. So many things.
Right.
Um, but it also makes you wonder how that impacts their lives just on a broader scale, like stress levels, creativity, even just their overall happiness.
Exactly.
But if we look at Remote's rankings,
Okay.
they have New Zealand at #1.
Okay.
And they emphasize New Zealand's focus on like family and well-being and recreation and travel.
Yeah.
And it's fascinating how these values are just like baked into their entire culture.
And that's reflected in their policies.
Totally.
26 weeks of paid maternity leave, 32 days of annual leave.
Wow.
They have a decent minimum wage, 80% statutory sick pay.
Yeah.
So you can see how that would really create a society where people feel valued,
Hmm.
both inside and outside of work.
Absolutely.
It seems like a theme that we're seeing here is
Yeah.
the countries that are at the top of these rankings have really robust
Yeah.
social safety nets.
Yeah. I think that's a key insight here.
Yeah.
These support systems provide a sense of security that really allows people to focus on their well-being.
Right.
So when you're not constantly worried about healthcare or education or financial stability,
Mm-hmm.
you just have more mental space to prioritize things like leisure and personal growth.
Exactly.
It's not just about time off.
Right.
It's about the peace of mind that comes with knowing that you're supported.
Right. And then we have Denmark
Yeah.
that's consistently praised for its welfare state, free education, healthcare, and it's all funded by a pretty high tax rate.
Right.
Do you think that trade-off is a key factor
Yeah.
in their ranking?
I think it's hard to deny the correlation.
Yeah.
They also offer 36 days of annual leave, 100% sick pay,
Wow.
and universal health care.
Mm-hmm.
And it's worth noting that they're considered one of the most LGBTQ plus friendly countries in Europe.
Yeah.
Which speaks to like a broader commitment to inclusivity and social justice.
Absolutely. And okay, but those high taxes,
Yeah.
some might argue that that hinders individual
Yeah.
economic freedom.
Right.
So how do you reconcile that with the idea of work-life balance?
Right.
Is it a case of just prioritizing collective well-being over individual financial gains?
I mean, that's the big question, isn't it?
Yeah.
Like it really forces us to confront different societal values and what we prioritize as a culture.
Right.
Like, is individual financial freedom more important than collective well-being?
Right.
There's no easy answer,
Right.
but it's a debate worth having.
Okay, so let's talk about the U.S.
Yeah.
Because despite this whole American dream narrative,
Right.
it seems to be lagging behind in work-life balance.
It really is.
Remote ranks the U.S. 53rd on their list.
Wow.
What factors are contributing to this lower ranking?
Well, the lack of basic worker protections is a glaring issue.
Yeah.
There's no statutory annual leave,
Right.
no guaranteed sick pay,
Yeah.
and of course, no universal health care system.
Right.
I mean, these are pretty standard in many other developed countries.
Yeah.
So the U.S. is at a real disadvantage globally.
It seems like the system really prioritizes work above all else.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're constantly worried about getting sick and not being able to afford health care,
Right.
or losing your job and not having any financial safety net,
Exactly.
it's hard to imagine feeling balanced.
Absolutely. And this raises a crucial question.
What's that?
Can the U.S. maintain its economic competitiveness if its workforce is increasingly stressed and burnt out?
Right. And that's a great point because there was a study that showed that
Oh, really?
a majority of people,
Wow.
65% in England and 63% in the US,
Okay.
would actually choose work-life balance over a higher paycheck.
It's huge.
Yeah,
It's a pretty big deal.
it is a pretty big deal.
It signifies a real shift in priorities, especially among younger generations.
Yeah.
So millennials and Gen Z, they're entering the workforce with different expectations.
Totally.
They want flexibility, they want to work remotely,
Mm.
and they want a company culture that prioritizes their well-being.
Yeah.
It's not just about climbing the corporate ladder anymore.
Yeah, they're not buying into that.
Exactly.
So companies are having to adapt.
Yeah, they are.
They can't just dangle a big salary and expect people to come running.
Exactly.
They have to create a work environment that supports the whole person.
You're absolutely right. It's no longer enough to just offer a competitive salary.
Right.
Companies need to think about things like flexible work arrangements, paid time off, mental health resources, and a culture that values work-life balance.
Exactly. This is zooming out a bit.
Yeah.
The OECD report found that 10% of employees in their member countries are working over 50 hours a week,
Wow, that's a lot.
which is a lot of
Okay.
overtime.
Yeah, it definitely raises some concerns about worker exploitation and the need for stronger international labor standards.
Right. And it highlights the persistent gender gap in work-life balance
Right.
as well, because the OECD found that 14% of men work over 50 hours a week,
Oh, wow.
compared to 6% of women.
That's a big difference.
So that disparity
Yeah.
likely reflects the unequal burden of caregiving responsibilities.
Right.
That often falls on women.
Of course.
And when you look at the countries with the highest percentages of employees working over 50 hours a week, you see Mexico at 27%, Turkey at 25%, and Colombia at 24%. Does this suggest a need for more robust worker protections in certain regions of the world?
Yeah, it's certainly a red flag.
Yeah.
It's not just about like individual choices. There are often like systemic factors at play
Right.
that kind of force people into these long working hours.
Yeah.
And we need to consider things like minimum wage laws,
Right.
access to affordable childcare, and just cultural norms around work and leisure.
It's a really complex issue.
Yeah.
So achieving truly healthy work-life balance isn't just about individual actions. It requires us to address these larger societal issues as well.
Exactly. It's a very complex issue with no easy solutions.
Right.
But this data gives us a starting point for understanding the challenges and the opportunities that exist all around the world.
Absolutely. So it seems like we're seeing this real push and pull between like individual desires for work-life balance
Right.
and these larger systemic issues
Yeah.
that get in the way.
Totally. And it's not just individuals that are pushing for this change.
Yeah.
Companies are starting to recognize the benefits of supporting their employees' well-being.
So beyond just like attracting top talent,
Yeah.
there are actual benefits
Yeah,
to their
absolutely.
businesses too.
Studies have shown that when employees feel supported in maintaining a healthy work-life balance, they're more engaged,
Okay.
more productive, and less likely to burn out.
So a company that prioritizes work-life balance could actually end up being more productive.
It's kind of counterintuitive,
Yeah.
but that seems to be the case.
Interesting.
When employees feel valued and respected, they're more likely to be loyal and committed to their work.
So it creates like a positive feedback loop.
Exactly.
So what are some things that companies can do
Yeah.
to create that kind of supportive environment?
Well, offering flexible work arrangements is a big one.
Okay.
So things like remote work options or flexible hours
Right.
can make a huge difference, especially for parents or caregivers.
And I would imagine that would help cut down on commuting time, which is a big stressor for a lot of people.
Absolutely. And promoting a culture of open communication is really crucial too.
Yeah.
Employees need to feel comfortable discussing their needs and concerns with their managers.
So it's not just about having the policies.
Right.
It's about having a culture where they feel comfortable using them
Exactly.
without being judged or facing repercussions.
Yeah. Managers need to be trained to recognize the signs of burnout
Okay.
and to actively support their team members in maintaining that healthy work-life balance.
What about like encouraging employees to actually use their vacation time?
Yeah.
I feel like especially in the US, there's this pressure to always be on,
Right.
and taking time off can almost feel like a sign of weakness.
Yeah, it's so interesting how that varies across cultures.
Right.
In some countries, taking time off is not only accepted but encouraged.
Yeah.
It's seen as essential for recharging and coming back to work refreshed and motivated.
Right.
So companies can play a role in shifting that mindset.
Are there other things that companies can do
Mm-hmm.
to promote well-being?
Yep.
Like, I've heard of things like mindfulness training or yoga classes being offered at work.
Yeah.
Does that stuff actually work?
I think those types of wellness programs can be incredibly valuable.
Okay.
It shows that the company is really invested in the holistic well-being of its employees.
Yeah.
It's not just about squeezing every last drop of productivity out of them.
We've been talking a lot about individual companies,
Yeah.
but what about larger structural changes? Is
Dang.
there a role for government policy in all of this?
Absolutely. Government policies can create the foundation for a more balanced society.
Okay.
Things like mandated paid leave, affordable childcare,
Right.
and universal health care can make a huge difference.
And we see how those policies play out in the countries that rank high
Exactly.
in work-life balance.
It's not just about individual companies doing the right thing.
Right.
It requires a systemic approach.
Yeah. So speaking of structural changes, there's been a lot of talk lately about the 4-day work week.
Oh, yeah.
Some companies have experimented with it,
Mm-hmm.
and the results seem promising.
Yeah, it's a fascinating development.
It is.
The idea is to reduce the work week to 4 days without reducing pay.
So you're working the same number of hours,
Right.
but over 4 days instead of 5.
Exactly. And early studies suggest that it can lead to increased productivity, reduced stress, and improved employee morale.
That sounds like a win-win.
It does seem that way.
For everyone.
Of course, it's not a one-size-fits-all solution.
Right.
And it might not be feasible for every industry or company.
But it's worth exploring
Totally.
as we rethink these traditional notions of work.
It challenges the assumption that we need to be working 5 days a week
Right.
to be productive and successful.
Okay, so let's bring it back to this global landscape of work-life balance.
Okay.
We've seen how different countries are approaching this in very different ways.
It's fascinating to see how cultural values and societal norms shape people's experiences of work.
We talked about the strong social safety nets in Western Europe
Right.
and how those contribute to a greater sense of security and well-being.
And in contrast, the United States, with its limited worker protections and lack of universal health care,
Right?
faces unique challenges in promoting work-life balance.
It's like two different philosophies of work
That's a great way to put it. Yeah.
at play here.
In some cultures, work is seen as the primary source of identity and purpose.
Right.
In others, it's viewed as just one important aspect of a well-rounded life.
And those cultural differences really impact people's expectations
Absolutely.
of work-life balance.
It's important to be aware of those cultural nuances when we're comparing work-life balance across different countries.
But even within the same country,
Right.
there can be a lot of variation depending on things like industry,
Yeah.
company culture,
Of course.
individual circumstances.
You're absolutely right. There's no single definition of work-life balance.
Right.
That applies to everyone.
It's very personal.
It's a highly personal and subjective concept.
So how do our listeners navigate these really complex
Yeah.
and often conflicting expectations?
It starts with defining your own priorities.
Okay.
What are your non-negotiables? What are
Yeah.
the things that make you feel fulfilled and balanced?
So it's about self-reflection and getting clear on your values.
Exactly. Once you have a clear understanding of your own needs and values,
Mhm.
you can start to make choices that align with those priorities.
So that might mean setting boundaries with work, negotiating flexible work arrangements, or even considering a career change.
It's also important to be realistic about what you can achieve.
Right.
Perfection is not the goal.
So it's about finding a balance that works for you.
Exactly. And remember, work-life balance is a journey, not a destination.
Yeah.
It's something that you'll need to continually reassess and adjust as your life changes.
It's like finding a rhythm that
Yeah.
allows you to thrive.
Exactly. And don't be afraid to ask for help or support when you need it.
Right. There are resources available like therapists and coaches and support groups
Absolutely.
that can help you.
And remember, you're not alone in this journey.
Yeah.
A lot of people are struggling with these same issues.
Okay. So we've covered a lot in this deep dive. We've looked at those global rankings,
Yeah.
different cultural approaches, the role of companies and governments in creating more balanced work lives.
It's complicated.
It is. So what are some key takeaways?
Yeah. What do we want our listeners to remember?
Yeah. What are they walking away with?
I think the biggest one is just that
Yeah.
you can't achieve a truly healthy work-life balance just through individual effort.
Right. It's not just about you.
Yeah. It takes more.
Yeah.
It requires a multifaceted approach
Yeah.
that really addresses those systemic issues we talked about.
Like, we saw those countries that have strong social safety nets,
Right.
cultures that value well-being, they tend to rank higher in work-life balance.
And for a reason.
Yeah.
Those factors create this whole environment where people feel supported,
Yeah.
empowered to prioritize their own well-being.
And we can't forget about companies either.
No, absolutely not.
They can create a more supportive environment.
For sure, things like flexible work arrangements,
Yeah.
open communication, that real commitment to employee well-being,
That makes a big difference.
it can make all the difference.
Yeah, but even with all of those supports,
Yeah,
it still comes down to the individual.
absolutely.
It's about setting those priorities, setting boundaries, advocating for your own needs.
You're right. It's about recognizing that work is just one part of a fulfilling life. It's not everything.
Yeah.
And that prioritizing your own well-being
Yeah.
isn't selfish.
Right.
It's essential for success.
Yeah. In all areas of your life.
Exactly. Personal and professional.
If you could leave our listeners with one final thought,
Yeah. Let me think.
what would it be?
Okay. Work-life balance.
Yeah.
It's a journey, not a destination.
Yeah. We've said that a few times.
But it's so true.
It is.
It's about finding that rhythm that works for you.
right.
Being willing to adjust as your life changes.
It's not one size fits all.
Nope. There's no magic formula.
You have to find what works for you.
And for your family and your life and everything.
It's about finding that sweet spot where you can really thrive,
For sure.
both personally and professionally.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you for joining us
Thanks for having me.
on this deep dive into work-life balance around the world.
Such an interesting topic.
It is so, we hope it was insightful
Yeah.
and maybe even a little inspiring.
Maybe a lot inspiring.
And remember, you can create a work life that's fulfilling and sustainable.
Don't be afraid to challenge the status quo.
That's right. Advocate for what you need.
It's your life.
Until next time, keep learning, keep exploring,
Yep,
and
yep.
keep striving for that work-life balance.
It's worth it.